The scent of acetone hung faintly in the air as I stared at my hands under the fluorescent lights of the nail salon. My fingers trembled slightly, though not from age or illness. These were hands that had once lifted two children out of bathtubs, bandaged scraped knees, and held the hand of my dying husband through countless chemo treatments. These hands had charted vital signs, changed IV bags, and written condolence cards for families I barely knew during my 30 years as a nurse. They had always been steady, until now. Across the salon, a young woman laughed into her phone, her diamond engagement ring catching the light. I looked away quickly. My daughter Emily had a ring like that now. Platinum. Custom. Paid for by her fiancé Chase's connections in the entertainment industry. Emily used to laugh like that too. Before she blocked my number. Before she turned me into a stranger. It had been 9 days since our last conversation. 9 days since she asked, no demanded, that I contribute $80,000 to her wedding. When I refused offering $20,000 instead, she told me I was selfish, that I didn't care about her happiness, that maybe I was too old to understand what weddings meant now. Then she cut me off. Silence, not a word since, until yesterday. Yesterday she called. Her voice was calm, almost warm. She said she was pregnant, 2 months along. She said she wanted me to be part of the baby's life, that she missed me, that we should talk, rebuild. She invited me to dinner at Takahashi, the old Japanese restaurant where her father used to take us every year on his birthday. The invitation sounded innocent, hopeful even, but something in her voice felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that this dinner wasn't about reconciliation at all. It felt like something else. It felt like a setup. My name is Sandra Patterson. I am 61 years old, recently retired, and living alone in a modest condo on the outskirts of Denver. After spending over 3 decades as a registered nurse, mostly in oncology, I had planned to spend the rest of my years tending to my small garden, volunteering at the local animal shelter, and occasionally babysitting for neighbors. My husband Robert passed away 5 years ago after a long and painful battle with pancreatic cancer. We met in college, married at 23, and built a life out of equal parts love and sacrifice. We had 2 children, Emily and Noah. Emily, the younger, is 34, a fashion designer who moved to Los Angeles right after college and never looked back. She's brilliant, driven, and impossibly charming when she wants to be. Her world is curated filtered photos, perfect angles, champagne brunches, designer heels. I used to think she was just ambitious. Now I'm not so sure. Noah, her older brother, is 36, a tenured literature professor at a university in Boulder. He is quiet, thoughtful, and deeply principled. The kind of man who sends handwritten thank you notes and still calls me every Sunday, even if only to ask how the garden is doing. The contrast between my children couldn't be starker. Emily is fire-flashing, unpredictable, consuming. Noah is stone, steady, grounded, enduring. After Robert died, I sold the family home and downsized. The condo I bought was small but filled with light. I painted the walls soft sage green, hung family photos in the hallway, and finally bought the reading chair I had always wanted. It was my space, my peace. For a time, Emily visited once a year, usually at Christmas, always with an expensive gift and 1,000 excuses about how busy she was. I accepted that. She had her life. I had mine. But things changed when she met Chase, a film producer 10 years older than her, smooth as marble with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He flattered me at first, calling me Mom, asking about my retirement plans, but there was always a sense that he was calculating, watching, weighing. I could feel it even if I couldn't explain it. Still, I tried to be supportive. When they announced their engagement, I smiled, hugged her tightly, and told her I was happy for her. Because that's what mothers do. They show up, even when they're unsure, even when they're afraid. The tension began with a phone call on a rainy Tuesday morning. I remember because I was trimming the ivy on the balcony when Emily's name flashed across my screen. I wiped my hands on my gardening apron and answered with a cheerful, "Hi, sweetheart," unaware of what was coming. Her voice was clipped businesslike. She launched right in. "Mom, Chase and I have finalized the wedding budget. We're going to need $80,000 from you." I laughed, thinking she was joking. I'd offered to help, of course. I'd even set aside $20,000, which I thought was generous. That alone could pay for a beautiful ceremony at a vineyard just outside Santa Barbara. But Emily wasn't laughing. "This is serious," she said. "We've booked a venue in Tuscany. The deposit is non-refundable, and we need to reserve the private estate fly and the designer secure the photographers. Chase has high-profile guests. This isn't just a wedding, it's a brand moment. A brand moment. That's what she called it." I felt my stomach tighten. "Emily," I said gently, "I want you to have a beautiful wedding, but $80,000 is my retirement cushion. It's what your father and I worked for. I can't jeopardize my future for a party no matter how elegant." There was a silence on the line, sharp and suffocating. Then she said it. "You're being selfish." I sat down, the words hitting like a slap. "I'm offering $20,000, I said. "That's not selfish. That's support within my means." But she was already ramping up. "You live alone. You've paid off your condo. You don't travel. You barely spend. You're sitting on money you don't even use. And you won't help your only daughter." I tried to reason with her to remind her that weddings are a day, but security is a lifetime, that her father would have wanted her to be practical. But she wasn't listening. Her voice grew colder with each sentence. "If you're not willing to invest in my future," she said, "then maybe I need to rethink what family means to me." Then she hung up. I stared at the phone in disbelief. Over the next few days, she blocked me on every platform, calls, messages, even email. Her Instagram, once filled with travel photos and behind-the-scenes fashion shoots, suddenly had cryptic posts about cutting out toxic energy and choosing peace over blood. Friends began texting asking if everything was okay. I lied. I said she was busy, that we were fine. But I knew better. I knew this wasn't just about money. It was about control, about power. And for the first time in our relationship, I realized my daughter wasn't just angry. She was calculating, and I had become her target. It was a Friday afternoon when the call came unexpected and jarring. I was organizing Robert's old books, trying to decide which ones to donate and which to keep, when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, assuming it was spam, but something nudged me to answer. "Mom." Her voice was soft, tentative, unfamiliar in its vulnerability. My heart lurched before my mind could caution me. "Emily," I said, barely above a whisper. "Yeah, I've been thinking." She paused. "Maybe we both overreacted." I waited. The silence between us was like a thread pulled taut. "I'm pregnant," she said finally. 2 months. We weren't going to announce yet, but I wanted you to know. I want my child to know their grandmother." My breath caught. Pregnant. My daughter was going to be a mother. For a moment, the anger, the tension, the silence, all of it fell away, replaced by a flood of emotion I wasn't ready for. "Emily, can we meet?" she interrupted. "Somewhere neutral. Talk. Start over." I hesitated, but she rushed on. "Chase and I were thinking of Takahashi. You remember it, right? The place Dad loved. We thought maybe it would feel safe." My throat tightened. Of course I remembered. Robert adored Takahashi. It was where we celebrated his 50th birthday, where Emily learned to use chopsticks, where Noah first ordered miso soup like an adult. That place held memories, all of them warm. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that motherhood had softened her, made her reflect, that she had found the humility to reconnect without strings. "All right," I said carefully. "Takahashi. What time?" 7, she said quickly, as if afraid I might change my mind. "We already made a reservation." Already made. That detail stuck with me. I brushed it off, though. I wanted to see her. I needed to know if my daughter was still in there beneath the curated cruelty, the ambition, the walls. The next few hours passed in a daze. I tried on 3 different dresses before settling on a navy blouse and slacks. Something respectful, strong. I pulled out Robert's old watch and slid it on, grounding myself in his steady presence. As I drove to the restaurant, my stomach fluttered with nerves and hope, 2 emotions I hadn't allowed myself to feel in weeks. Maybe this was real. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Or maybe, just maybe, it was something else entirely. The restaurant looked exactly as I remembered it. Takahashi sat tucked between a florist and an antique bookstore on a quiet street in Cherry Creek, its shoji doors and lantern-lit windows casting a warm, nostalgic glow. I parked, carefully checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, and took a steadying breath before stepping out into the cool evening air. Inside, the host greeted me with a polite bow and led me to a private room near the back. The paper screens were partially drawn, and I could hear the faint clinking of dishes from the main dining area. Emily was already there, seated at the table, wearing a sleek ivory wrap dress that probably cost more than I'd spent on groceries that month. Her hair was glossy, curled just enough, her makeup soft and flattering. She looked like a magazine cover. She rose when she saw me and gave me a brief hug, one that felt rehearsed, almost staged. "You look great, Mom," she said with a practiced smile. "Thanks for coming." "Of course," I said, my voice a bit tight. "How are you feeling?" "Good," she replied, placing a hand on her barely showing belly. "Tired, but happy." She gestured for me to sit. The waitress brought tea and menus, though I barely glanced at mine. My eyes were on my daughter, trying to read her to find the child I used to know. We exchanged a few pleasantries, whether the drive a new project she was working on, but it all felt like scaffolding around something heavier. Then she glanced at her phone. "Chase is running a bit late," she said. "He had a call with a producer in New York." I nodded. "Okay." A few minutes later, Chase arrived dressed in a navy blazer and crisp white shirt, his cologne arriving seconds before he did. But he wasn't alone. Behind him walked 3 men, all in dark suits, each carrying a leather briefcase. The air in the room shifted instantly. Mom, Emily said, not quite meeting my eyes. "These are some of Chase's colleagues. They just happened to be in the area and thought they'd join us for a quick chat." I blinked. "Colleagues. Yes," Chase said smoothly, taking the seat across from me. "We've been talking a lot about family legacy planning ahead. We thought this might be a good opportunity to discuss something that would benefit everyone." One of the suited men opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Grant Elwell, legal counsel for Mr. Thompson. We've drafted a set of documents we'd like to review with you." My stomach turned. I looked at Emily, but her eyes were fixed on the teacup in front of her. "What kind of documents?" I asked slowly. "A durable power of attorney," Grant replied. "Essentially, it would give Emily and Chase the authority to help manage your financial affairs, investments, property, retirement accounts. Nothing invasive, just supportive. With your recent retirement and your status as a widow, it makes sense to have some assistance." My chest tightened. "I'm 61, not senile," I said quietly. "Of course," he said, his tone condescending. "But think of this as a proactive measure. Protection, really." Chase leaned forward. "This isn't about control, Sandra. It's about security. We want to ensure that everything is managed properly. You shouldn't have to worry about taxes or market shifts. Let us help." I turned to Emily. "Did you know about this?" She finally looked up. Her expression was unreadable. "I think it's the smart thing to do, Mom. And if you care about being part of your grandchild's life, this makes it easier." "Simpler." "Simpler," I echoed. "You're asking me to sign away control of my life." "No," she said. "We're asking you to trust us, to let us protect what you've built." Grant slid the folder across the table toward me. "You just need to sign here and initial there." I stared at the paperwork. Words like irrevocable access and authority leapt off the page. And then, Emily said the thing that froze me. "If you don't sign, we'll have to reconsider your involvement in the baby's life. It's your choice, but I think you know what the right one is." The room fell silent. My pulse pounded in my ears. I looked at the faces around me, calculated, prepared, waiting. This wasn't a reconciliation. It was an ambush. I didn't touch the folder. I didn't even blink. Instead, I reached slowly into my purse, past the tissues and mints, past the leather wallet Robert gave me on our 25th anniversary, until my fingers curled around my phone. I pulled it out, unlocked it, and calmly scrolled through my contacts. Emily shifted in her seat. Chase stiffened. "What are you doing?" Emily asked, her voice sharp around the edges. I pressed the call button. "Making sure someone else is part of this conversation," I said. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Barbara, it's Sandra. I'm at Takahashi back room. Can you come now? Bring the file." I hung up without waiting for a reply and placed my phone carefully on the table next to the untouched documents. Chase chuckled a nervous sound. "Who's Barbara, a friend?" "My attorney," I replied, folding my hands in my lap. "She lives 10 minutes from here. We used to work together before she went into elder law full-time." Grant Elwell's expression shifted slightly. The other two lawyers glanced at each other. Emily opened her mouth, then closed it. The room was no longer theirs. I had tilted the balance with a single phone call. I leaned back in my chair, calm and deliberate. "If we're discussing legal matters, I said it's only fair that I have representation." Chase tried to recover. "Sandra, we didn't mean to spring this on you. We just thought—" "You thought I'd be alone," I interrupted. "You thought you'd catch me off guard, guilt me into signing away decades of hard work and sacrifice. But I've lived too long and seen too much to fall for a dinner invitation that comes with legal paperwork." Emily looked pale now. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her mouth pressed into a line. "This isn't how it was supposed to go," she murmured. "How was it supposed to go?" I asked. "I show up nostalgic, maybe even crying a little, and you dangle a baby in front of me while 3 lawyers pressure me to surrender control of everything I've built." Chase's jaw clenched. "You're twisting it." "No," I said evenly. "You did that the moment you weaponized my grandchild." One of the other lawyers, younger than the rest, shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should wait for Mrs. Patterson's counsel before continuing." I gave him a tight smile. "That would be wise." The silence that followed was thick with recalculation. I sipped my tea and watched them squirm, each of them realizing that the woman they thought they could corner was not so easily boxed in. 10 minutes later, the door slid open and Barbara walked in. She was petite, silver-haired, and sharp-eyed, wearing a slate-gray suit and carrying a thick folder tucked beneath her arm. Her heels clicked softly on the hardwood floor as she approached our table. "Evening, everyone," she said smoothly, setting the folder down with precision. "I believe you wanted to review some documents with my client. Let's begin." Barbara opened the folder with the deliberate care of a woman who had dismantled dozens of manipulative family schemes over the course of her legal career. She didn't rush. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The weight of her presence alone was enough to change the atmosphere in the room. She flipped through the documents, eyes scanning each page with clinical precision, then glanced up at Chase and his team. "You're asking my client to grant durable power of attorney to her daughter and future son-in-law," she said evenly. "That would give them access to all of her assets, including retirement funds, property, and medical decisions. Do I have that correct?" "It's purely precautionary," Grant replied, shifting in his seat. "Given her age and recent transition into retirement, we believe it's the most efficient way to ensure her affairs are managed appropriately." Barbara raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Patterson is 61, lives independently, manages her own finances, and shows no signs of cognitive decline. Is there any medical documentation that suggests she's incapable of handling her own affairs?" "No," Chase said quickly. "But it's not about that. It's about support. She deserves peace of mind." Barbara nodded slowly. "Of course. And yet, I have here a series of emails, photographs, and witness statements that suggest Mr. Thompson has been visiting Mrs. Patterson's neighbors, inquiring about her behavior, asking whether she's become forgetful or confused, and even photographing her condo from multiple angles." She slid a glossy envelope across the table. Would anyone care to explain that Chase's face flushed a dull red? Emily's lips parted, but no words came out. Grant looked suddenly very interested in the ceiling. Additionally, Barbara continued, "We've documented online searches from a device registered to Mr. Thompson's business looking up Colorado's criteria for declaring an elder legally incompetent." Her voice remained calm, but each word landed like a hammer. "This isn't support. This is groundwork for a legal takeover." Chase opened his mouth, then closed it again. Barbara turned to me. "Sandra, 2 weeks ago, we finalized the creation of a trust, the Patterson Family Trust. All of your assets, your condo, your investments, your savings, and your insurance policies have been transferred into the trust, which names both of your children as future beneficiaries, but only after your death and with Noah as the trustee until any heirs reach the age of 25. She looked directly at Emily now. "That means you and by extension Mr. Thompson have no access to those funds. Not now, not ever, unless Sandra herself authorizes it through a separate revocable action. The silence in the room was electric. I sat still, watching my daughter's face shift from defiance to shock to something like fear. Chase looked like he'd been punched. "You tricked us," he said quietly. "No," I said. "I protected myself. You tried to isolate me, manipulate me, and corner me, but I've spent my entire life looking out for other people. I know what betrayal looks like, and I know how to prepare for it." Barbara gathered the documents neatly. "Unless you plan to challenge the trust, which I assure you would not go well, you may want to reconsider your strategy moving forward." Grant stood abruptly. "I think we've seen enough." The other lawyers followed him stiff and silent, making a quick exit. Chase lingered a moment longer, staring at Emily, who had yet to speak. "We can fix this," he muttered, but the words lacked conviction. Then he was gone too. Emily and I were alone. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she whispered, "I just wanted to feel safe." "You don't build safety by tearing down the people who love you," I said quietly. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks, but I couldn't tell if they were for me or for the future she'd just lost. I didn't leave right away. After Chase and the lawyers disappeared, and Emily sat quietly across from me, I asked the waitress to box up our uneaten food. There was something too hollow about abandoning the table completely, like letting them have the last word in a conversation they never deserved to start. Emily wiped her tears with a linen napkin, her mascara smudged beneath her eyes. "Do you hate me?" she asked, her voice almost childlike. I looked at her carefully, seeing not just the woman sitting across from me, but the little girl who used to braid her doll's hair beside me while I cooked the teenager who cried on my lap after her first heartbreak, the young woman who once proudly declared she wanted to build something on her own. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I no longer recognize you." Her chin trembled. I thought, if we could just manage things differently, maybe we'd all be better off. I shook my head. You don't fix family with ultimatums. You don't rebuild trust through paperwork and threats. She looked down at her lap. "What happens now?" I took a deep breath, not to calm myself, but to steady the words I'd been holding inside. "What happens now is up to you. If you want me in your life and in your child's life, it has to be on honest terms. Not manipulations, not conditions. You come to me alone, and you come with truth. Until then, I need space. I need peace." She didn't respond. I didn't expect her to. Some truths need time to take root. I stood, collected my things, and placed the untouched manila folder back in front of her. "You can keep this," I said. "Remind yourself of what you tried to do and why it didn't work." Outside, the evening air was crisp, the kind of chill that wakes you up. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching people move past the restaurant windows, unaware of the emotional war that had just taken place inside. Barbara came out a minute later, her briefcase in one hand, her keys in the other. "You all right?" she asked. "Better than I thought I'd be," I said. "Empty but clear." She nodded. "That clarity will serve you, and it'll protect you." We hugged briefly and she left. I walked to my car, sat behind the wheel, and stared at the steering wheel for a full minute before starting the engine. As I drove home, the city lights blurred into streaks on my windshield. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was something deeper resolved. That night, I packed away the last of Robert's books, brewed a cup of tea, and sat in my reading chair without turning on the television. I listened to the silence not as a punishment, but as permission. Permission to choose peace over people who didn't know how to value it. Permission to let go without guilt. Permission to begin again. 6 months later, my life looked different in ways both small and monumental. I'd joined a community group at the local library focused on financial literacy for retirees, most of them women like me, widows, divorcees, or simply those who had never learned to manage their money because someone else had always done it for them. I wasn't just attending, I was teaching. Barbara had introduced me to the program director, and before long, I found myself sharing strategies, warning signs, and the hard-won wisdom of experience. Every Tuesday evening, we gathered in a circle of folding chairs, our thermoses of tea balanced on our knees, sharing stories that were both heartbreaking and infuriating. Stories of children forging signatures of caregivers, siphoning off bank accounts of siblings who treated inheritance like a prize to be claimed early. And through it all, we found strength in one another. I didn't tell many people about what had happened with Emily, not in detail, but the few who knew always looked at me with a mix of sympathy and admiration. I didn't need either. What I needed was purpose, and I had found it. Janet, the neighbor I'd grown close to since moving in, came with me to every session. She had her own story. Her son had tried to force her to sell her home and move into assisted living under the guise of safety, when what he really wanted was the equity. She fought back, and like me, she won. We became something of a duo, the Steele sisters, as one woman jokingly called us. Our bond had grown into a quiet, resilient friendship built not on shared hobbies or proximity, but on mutual respect. One Thursday morning, while I was watering the succulents on my windowsill, my phone rang. It was Noah. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Just wanted to check in." Also, Emily had the baby. My heart did a strange thing somewhere between a skip and a squeeze. "Girl or boy?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "A girl," he said. 7 pounds even. They named her Eleanor Rose, my mother's name, and mine. I sat down slowly. "She's healthy." "Yes." "Perfect according to the doctors." "And Emily tired?" "Quiet." "She asked me to call you, said she'd like to see you." I didn't answer right away. I stared at the pale green leaves of the succulent in front of me, its edges soft but unyielding. "She wants to discuss the trust again, doesn't she?" "Probably," he admitted. She hinted at it. "Said she's worried about security, about stability for Eleanor, so she's using the baby as leverage." "I can't say for sure," he said, "but I told her that if she wants a relationship with you, it has to be honest. And if she wants to meet, it has to be on your terms." "Thank you," I said, and meant it. That afternoon I sat down at my writing desk and pulled out a cream-colored card from the drawer. I wrote slowly, choosing each word like I was placing bricks in a foundation. I told Emily I was happy to hear that Eleanor was healthy and that I would love to meet her. But I also made it clear that any meeting would take place in the presence of Noah and that discussions of money trust modifications or past grievances would not be tolerated. Any breach of those terms would end the visit immediately. I sealed the envelope, addressed it in my best cursive, and walked it down to the mailbox. I didn't know what she'd decide, but I had finally made mine. I would be a grandmother, but not a victim. I would be open, but not unguarded. I would love, but with boundaries. And I would never again mistake silence for peace. There's a particular kind of grief that comes not from death, but from disappointment. It's the grief of realizing that someone you raised, someone you loved with every fiber of your being, sees you not as a person, but as a resource. That kind of grief doesn't arrive with flowers or casseroles. It arrives quietly disguised as silence, or a legal folder on a dinner table, or a baby's name chosen with strategy rather than sentiment. And yet through all of it, I learned something I wish I had known sooner. Boundaries are not rejection. They are protection. Saying no is not cruelty. It is clarity. Choosing peace does not mean choosing loneliness. It means choosing yourself. I don't know what kind of mother people think I am. I'm sure some who hear my story will say I was too harsh, too calculating, too cold. But what they don't see are the years I spent giving, the decades of quiet sacrifice, the nights of worry, the mornings of hope. What they don't understand is that I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to survive with my dignity intact. Some people think being a good mother means saying yes, always yes, no matter the cost. But I've come to believe that the best kind of mothering includes teaching by example. And sometimes the lesson is this: love does not equal surrender. It is now spring, and the tree outside my condo has begun to bloom again. I sit in my reading chair, a cup of chamomile tea in hand, and I watch the blossoms sway gently in the breeze. I do not know if Emily will call. I do not know if I will one day hold Eleanor and trace the shape of her face with these hands that have seen so much. But I do know that whatever happens next, I will face it with strength, with grace, and with boundaries that cannot be negotiated. Because the greatest gift I can give my granddaughter is not a check or a trust fund. It is the legacy of a woman who stood her ground, who chose integrity over manipulation, who taught simply by living that some women cannot be moved,